Please tell me one actual
heretic,
gospel
false
commandment
Christian,
or
total
teaching
liar,
of Christ.
complete fraud.
Please tell me one actual gospel. Please tell us all and the viewers watching one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ that the MAGA movement fights for.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Genuinely glad you are here for this one because this is a conversation I have been wanting to cover for a long time. So what you are about to watch is a three-way debate between a proud Christian nationalist, a conservative Christian commentator, and a progressive Catholic author. And they are going head-to-head over one of the most charged questions in American culture right now. Does the modern Christian conservative movement actually represent the teachings of Christ, or has faith been turned into a political tool? And trust me, it gets intense fast. And do yourself a favor and stay all the way through this one, because the moment that happens in the middle of this debate, where one panelist challenges another to name a single gospel commandment their movement fights for, and the response is complete silence on that question, that alone is worth every second of your time. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from. It always blows me away seeing how many different countries tune in, and I genuinely love reading where you all are from. All right, let us get into it.
I keep hoping that one of these preventable attacks will inspire our Christian friends on the right to want to make it a little bit harder for unstable white men to easily get weapons that are designed to kill lots of people really fast. I really hoped after the awful murder of Mr. Kirk that some of our friends on the right would agree that maybe it's far too easy for unstable 20-something males to get their hands on hardware and pop off and murder people at a political rally.
He was using an antique rifle, dude. He was using, hang on, he was using an antique rifle.
I know.
An antique bolt.
It was unsecured.
Legislation?
I didn't interrupt you once, my friend. I didn't interrupt you one time.
What legislation do you think would have even been passed that would have prevented
if his grandfather had been obliged to if his grandfather had been legally obliged to keep his gun secured at home, that shooting wouldn't have happened, and the Sandy Hook shooting would not have happened.
You can't even demonstrate that's true. For all you know, the kid has the safe code.
You're not letting me finish, and you've interrupted me twice now. Piers, the deal is right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered, and you're really going to... I'm going to answer Piers's question, my friend. I didn't interrupt you. Right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered for a very long time into aligning with power and authority instead of challenging it as Christ did. Donald Trump didn't get the love of evangelicals by promising to do a damn thing Jesus commanded of us. Right-wing Christianity does not fight for the things Jesus commanded and taught us to do. Right-wing Christianity fights for conservative Christian power over every level of society. They do not fight to welcome the stranger, as Christ commands in Matthew 25 and as God commands throughout the Old Testament. They do not fight for individuals and nations to care for the sick and the poor, as commanded by Christ in the judgment of nations. They fight for right-wing conservative Christian power, and America is suffering from a gun plague where children are now killed by guns more than disease, more than they are killed by car accidents. And I keep praying this is exactly the sort of situation where religion based on love and empathy will come to our rescue. And yet, our conservative Christian friends are locked in this mindset that somehow personal freedoms matter more than the lives of Americans.
Isabel, you've been pulling... hang on, let Andrew, I'll come back to you, but let Isabel react, because you've been pulling a lot of faces as you were listening to that.
Yeah, you know, Piers, I was on with you the day that Charlie was shot, actually. We were talking about the murder of Irina Zarutska on the train in Charlotte, and I was very baffled by what I was hearing then. Nothing could have prepared me for the slew of attack against anyone who is a conservative Christian in America the last 30 seconds. There is not a single gun law on the books that would have prevented Charlie Kirk from being assassinated at a gun-free zone on the campus of Utah Valley University. When we saw the manifesto published to YouTube about the shooter at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, you saw a very specific, detailed attack that was specifically against Christian children and their families, really warping in a very twisted demonic sense the mass with engravings and diary entries saying, "This is my body." I mean, we were watching a very coordinated attack going back to the Nashville shooting and to many other attacks on churches across the country over the past few years, of which there have been more than 500 attacks on Catholic churches in the United States in the last 5 years or so. This is clearly a specific attack against Christianity in America. But
this is the part that stopped me cold. Because John Fugelsang is not just making a political argument here, he is making a theological one, and that distinction matters more than people realize. He said something that I think a lot of people feel, but never here articulated this clearly. John said right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered for a very long time into aligning with power and authority instead of challenging it as Christ did, and when I heard that I had to pause. Because he is not attacking Christianity, he is defending it. He is saying the version of faith being sold to millions of people right now has almost nothing to do with what was actually taught. You have to understand, there is a difference between a religion and a political movement that uses religion as its uniform. Those are two completely different things, and what John is pointing out is that one has been quietly replaced by the other, and most people did not notice when it happened. Here is what blows my mind about this segment. Isabel responds by talking about attacks on churches, and those concerns are real and valid. Nobody is dismissing the pain of those communities, but watch what happens to the actual argument John made. It just disappears. Nobody on the conservative side addresses it. Because how do you respond to John saying, right-wing Christianity fights for conservative Christian power over every level of society, without proving his point by fighting for power in your response? Think about that for a second. The deflection is the evidence, and this is actually not a new pattern in history. When the Roman Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity in the 4th century, scholars have debated for centuries whether that moment saved the faith or fundamentally changed it. Because the moment a religion becomes the official power structure, the question stops being what does this faith teach and starts being how do we maintain control. John is essentially saying that same tension is playing out right now in America. The argument being made here is not left versus right. It is about whether a movement is actually representing what it claims to represent. And so far in this clip, nobody has answered that.
Let's pretend that it's not just about America for a second, because the truth is it's not. Christianity by the numbers is by far and large the most persecuted religion on the face of the planet today. In Nigeria, just a few days ago, more than 60 people were killed using hammers and machetes after attending mass at a Catholic church there in Nigeria. And I read a study the other day, feel free to fact check me on this, to any of the other panelists, that more Christians have been slaughtered in Nigeria for being Christian in the last few years than Palestinians have been killed in Gaza during the midst of the Israeli-Gaza war. But you don't see any protests happening in the United States about that today. So it's ridiculous to try to create a left versus right paradigm here or some sort of attack against the Republican Party when there very clearly is a manifestation of spiritual warfare and demonic satanic influence in our society trying to attack Jesus Christ in America today.
Andrew, I want to play a clip.
I'm not a Democrat.
I'm going to let Andrew respond here. Chris Hedge, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, said on the Secular Talk podcast that Charlie Kirk's assassination was being used to create a new martyr for the movement of Christian nationalism, which he said is a backdoor to American fascism. Let's take a look.
When fascism comes to America, it won't be with swastikas and jackboots, and it will be with the Christian cross and mass recitations of the Pledge of Allegiance. You really got a glimpse of that in the rally in Arizona or rally, whatever you want to call it, the memorial service for Kirk.
Now, Andrew, two questions for you. One is, what is your understanding of what Christian nationalism is? And as a Christian nationalist, are you concerned that it gets hijacked by people who may genuinely be white supremacists, fascists, and so on?
Well, not really. So the idea of Christian nationalism is just that Christians remain the culturally dominant force in the United States. That's it. That's the entire proposition. Everything else is an addition. So the gentleman over here, for instance, a quick question for you. Is Jesus Christ God?
I believe so, but I don't believe in imposing my opinions on others.
Okay, got you. So Jesus Christ is God. So all the religions are false?
No, I don't believe that at all. I believe in my house there are many mansions, and I believe God has many ways of the truth.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm better than anyone because Christ's movement is about humility. Christ's movement is not about public domination and power.
I just want to make sure I got this right. Are all other religions false?
I don't believe that at all, no. And I don't believe right-wing Christianity is true either.
Is Islam
right-wing Christianity does not...
Answer my question, dude.
MAGA
is Islam
does not fight for the teachings of Christ.
Is Islam true? Is Islam true?
Islam believes in the same God as Christians. Do you believe we should welcome the stranger as God and Christ command, or do you believe in Donald Trump?
Wait, they believe Jesus Christ is God?
It's not my religion. They believe Christ is a prophet.
So then
the
it's
Virgin
false.
Mary is mentioned more in the Holy Quran than she's mentioned in the Bible.
I'm going to walk you through the logic here. If Jesus Christ is God,
what are the Christ teachings that Trump fights for, my friend?
Then it is the case.
What are the gospel teachings your movement fights for? Your movement uses Christ as a prop, and you legislate against his commands.
Stop filibustering.
Dude, you interrupted
your question. So I was in the middle of it. I asked you a single question and was getting to the follow-up, and you go on these long diatribes.
You asked
Calm down,
two
listen to what I'm saying.
You asked two questions, my friend.
Logically, if it's the case that Jesus Christ is God, and that is true, then Islam has to be false, and you have to proclaim that that is the case as a follower of Christ.
Yes, too bad the founding fathers didn't have that system in our country.
Well, the thing that's so funny is that you say that you're a progressive Catholic. You're worried about Christians in power. You say that Christians are out here. Oh, Andrew, Christians are out here. They should be looking at these other immigrants as religious refugees. That's what you said, your own words.
They're actually Christian refugees. At our border, they are Christian refugees that y'all have been socialized to call illegals.
Then how come you lobbied for Kamala Harris, raised money for the Harris campaigns, a Democrat operative, when she said that she wanted staunch border policies? She literally went to Guatemala and said, "You're not allowed to come. Do not come."
I know she did. I'm not a Democrat, my friend. I'm not a Democrat. Her policies cause less harm than Trump's.
Okay, so this section is where the mask comes off, and I mean that in the most direct way possible. Andrew Wilson gets asked a simple question: what is Christian nationalism? And his answer is genuinely one of the most revealing things I have heard in a debate like this. He said the idea of Christian nationalism is just that Christians remain the culturally dominant force in the United States. That's it. That's the entire proposition. Sit with that for a moment. He is not saying Christians should be free to practice their faith. He is not saying Christians deserve protection from discrimination. He is saying Christians should remain dominant culturally over everyone else, and he said it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. This is the part that people need to really pay attention to. Maybe because dominance and faith are not the same thing. You can be deeply committed to your beliefs without needing to be dominant over other people. The moment your religion requires cultural supremacy over others to function, that is not a faith position anymore. That is a power position. And then John does something brilliant. Instead of arguing about politics, he goes straight to the source. He asks Andrew directly, what are the Christ teachings that the movement fights for? And Andrew does not answer. He tries to flip the question. He tries to corner John on Islam. He goes in 5 different directions, everything except answering what was asked. Here is what that tells you. When someone cannot defend their position using the framework they claim to follow, that is information. That is not a debate stumble. That is a structural problem with the argument itself. And the exchange about the border is fascinating because John openly says he is not a Democrat. He is not defending a party. He is defending a theological position. He is saying the way immigrants at the border are being treated contradicts the explicit commands of the faith that this movement claims to represent. That is a completely different argument than left versus right, and it keeps getting buried under political noise because nobody on the other side wants to address it directly.
To be a Democrat operative,
her policies caused less harm than Trump's, my friend. And her policies were closer to the actual teachings of Christ than Trump. Let me ask you
then that would be the exact same logic that we would have.
May I respectfully ask you one question? Can I ask you one question?
You're such a hypocrite, by the way.
Will you please? May I please ask you one question now that you've asked me so many, and now that you've called me names? Dude, hit the other cheek. I can take it. Call me more names. I want to ask you something. Please tell me one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ.
Complete fraud.
Please tell me one actual gospel. Please tell us all and the viewers watching one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ that the MAGA movement fights for. Not what conservative Christians like. Something Christ, who is a mascot to this movement, actually commanded of us. Chapter and verse, if you can.
Sure.
Welcome the stranger. Individuals and nations take care of the poor. Stop executing people. Your movement.
Do you want me to answer?
Let him answer the question then.
Please do.
Do you want me to answer, or
Please
are you going to answer? So the truth of the matter is that if you're really as concerned with the poor as you claim, you would be all about the MAGA movement, who's trying to stop job-crushing immigration
of the poor
to the United States. I'm giving it to you. Calm down.
Christ commands us to welcome
the stranger.
Calm down so I can answer your question, lunatic. I'm going to answer it precisely. Here's how it
The
works.
names of this guy.
If it is the case that you make these bold claims like you do in your book, that Christians ought to be paying taxes for the poor so that we could, for the poor, we got to give it all to the poor. That's what your view is.
That's not my suggestion, bro. That's
Case,
Jesus' suggestion.
then it would be the case. Then it would be the case that you would not want these job-crushing waves of mass migration coming to the United States, which displace
one teaching of Jesus,
the poor.
Andrew. Just one.
They
Give me
displace
one.
the poor.
Give me one teaching of Christ.
I just explained to you that
Give me
if
one
it's the
teaching
case,
of Christ you fight for.
I just did. I just explained to you, if you really want to uplift the poor, you don't do it with crushing
What
mass
Jesus
migration.
teaching did you explain?
I just explained to you that by your view of what Christians
What
ought to be
teaching?
doing, we are doing it. Do you not understand this?
Christ says that individuals and nations will be judged. Christ says in Matthew 25 that individuals and nations will be judged, heaven or hell,
and
by
tell
how
me
they
this.
care for the sick, care for the poor, welcome the stranger, and care for those in prison. MAGA legislates and votes against these commandments of Jesus.
And what was the Kamala Harris? What was the Kamala Harris Christian doctrine that you were for?
Kamala Harris is closer by light years to the teachings of Christ than the Republican Party, but I don't consider the Democrats to be. I'm not a Democrat.
This right here. This is the moment the entire debate was building toward. John Fugelsang looks across that table and says, "Please tell me one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ that the MAGA movement fights for. One. Chapter and verse if you can." And what happens? Andrew pivots to immigration economics. He talks about job displacement. He talks about the poor being harmed by migration. Not a single verse, not a single commandment, not one line from the Gospels. And I need you to understand why that is so significant. This is a man who is publicly identifying as a Christian nationalist, meaning his entire political identity is built around the claim that his movement represents Christian values. And when asked to name one teaching of Christ his movement fights for, he cannot do it. He argues economics instead. John then does something I found genuinely powerful. He quotes Matthew 25 directly. He says Christ says that individuals and nations will be judged, heaven or hell, by care for the sick, care for the poor, welcome the stranger, and care for those in prison. And then he says the movement legislates and votes against these commandments. That is not an opinion. Matthew 25 is not a contested passage. It is one of the clearest ethical frameworks in the entire New Testament. And the fact that the response to citing it directly is anger and deflection rather than a counter-scripture, that tells you everything. What John is doing throughout this entire debate is something really rare. He is not arguing against Christianity. He is arguing for it. And he is demanding that a movement claiming to represent Jesus actually demonstrate that in policy and in practice. And the inability to meet that challenge, using the religion's own text, is the most honest answer this debate produced. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.